At a small wildlife sanctuary, Manson is capturing a peaceful moment cuddling his special cat, a 30-pound bobcat named Charlie, purring against his chest. Mason just wants to record a sweet moment. But then, suddenly, Charlie's body locks up. His head snaps back, his paws thrash, and Mason realizes the bobcat in his arms is having a seizure. Its powerful legs begin paddling frantically. To an outsider, seeing a wild predator convulsing in a man's lap seems incomprehensible. But Charlie isn't just an ordinary bobcat. To Manson, Charlie is a trauma survivor in need of comfort, an animal who trusts him with his life. What happened next would not only test Mason's courage, but capture something almost no one ever sees. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun over the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana didn't just rise. It announced itself. It spilled over the jagged granite peaks in a cascade of molten gold, signaling the start of the day for everything that lived in the valley below. For Mason, a man whose hands were weathered by decades of hard work and whose eyes held the quiet patience of a saint, this was the golden hour. It was the time of day when the world felt suspended between the silence of the night and the bustle of the living. Mason ran a sanctuary for those who had no other place to go. It wasn't a zoo, and it wasn't a pet store. It was a haven for the broken, the orphaned, and the misunderstood wildlife of the American West. His days were measured in feeding schedules, enclosure repairs, and the heavy, rewarding responsibility of playing surrogate father to creatures that could, in another life, easily take a finger off. But this morning, the sanctuary was quiet. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth, that specific perfume of the American wilderness waking up. Mason sat in the main enclosure's acclimation room, a cup of coffee steaming on a nearby table, though he had forgotten about it long ago. His focus was entirely on the creature currently occupying the entirety of his lap. "Charlie Particle, hey Charlie, come here, buddy," Mason murmured, his voice dropping into that specific, affectionate register that animal lovers instinctively use. It was a nonsense nickname. Charlie Particle, born from a joke about how small the bobcat had been when he first arrived. Just a particle of life fighting to exist. Now Charlie was no particle. He was a substantial weight, a beautiful specimen of Lynx rufus. His coat was a tapestry of tawny brown and black spots, designed by nature to disappear into the underbrush. His ears, tipped with those signature black tufts, swiveled like radar dishes, catching the sound of a distant jay. But despite his wild heritage, despite the genetic code that screamed predator, Charlie was currently melting into Mason's flannel shirt like a domestic house cat seeking warmth. Mason had his phone out. It was a rare, quiet moment, and the morning light hitting Charlie's fur was too perfect not to document. He often recorded snippets of their life to share with the small community of supporters who helped keep the sanctuary lights on. He hit the record button, intending to capture the deep, rumbling purr that was vibrating through his own chest. "Look at you," Mason whispered, scratching the sweet spot right behind Charlie's ears. "King of the mountain, right here in my lap." For an outsider, the scene was almost incomprehensible. A 30-pound wild cat, an animal capable of taking down a deer, was curled up on a human being, trusting him implicitly. It was a testament to thousands of hours of patience. But the tranquility of the video and the peace of the morning was a fragile thing. In the wild, weakness is a death sentence. In the sanctuary, it was a secret shared only with those you trusted most. And Charlie trusted Mason with his life. To understand the weight of the moment that was about to happen, one had to understand the journey. Charlie hadn't always been this heavy, warm presence in Mason's lap. 3 years ago, Charlie had been a ball of spitting fury and terrified hiss. He had been brought to the sanctuary by a game warden, found shivering next to a highway in Wyoming. His mother nowhere to be found. He was emaciated, dehydrated, and suffering from a head trauma that suggested he'd been clipped by a passing car, or perhaps dropped by a predator. Mason remembered that first day vividly. He looked at the photo he kept on the wall of the office, a split-screen image in his mind. On one side, the Charlie of today, majestic, calm, loved. On the other side, the Charlie of the past, a tiny, scrappy kitten with ears too big for his head, baring his needle-sharp milk teeth at the hand trying to save him. He was a little demon, Mason often told visitors with a chuckle. He didn't know I was trying to help. He just knew he was hurt, and he was alone. Rehabilitating a bobcat is a delicate dance. Usually the goal is to keep them wild, to limit human contact so they can return to the forest where they belong. But Charlie was different. As the weeks turned into months, the effects of his head trauma became apparent. He had neurological deficits. His reaction times were just a fraction too slow for hunting. He sometimes lost his balance when climbing. The diagnosis was heartbreaking but clear. Charlie was non-releasable. If Mason turned him loose, he would starve, or worse, fall prey to a coyote or a mountain lion within a week. "So, you're stuck with me, kid?" Mason had told the kitten one snowy evening. That was when the relationship changed. Since Charlie couldn't go back to the wild, Mason had to become his world. They moved from the hands-off protocols of rehabilitation to the hands-on intimacy of lifelong care. It took a year for Charlie to stop flinching when Mason entered the enclosure. It took 2 years for him to solicit attention. And now, in year 3, he was a lap cat. But the neurological damage that kept him from the wild wasn't just about coordination. It was a ticking clock in his brain, a storm cloud that lived behind those golden eyes. Mason knew it. He lived with the anxiety of it every day. He knew that the wiring in Charlie's brain was fragile. They had managed it with diet, with stress reduction, with supplements. They had gone months without a major incident. Mason had almost let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, Charlie had outgrown the worst of it. He was wrong. The video on Mason's phone was still rolling. The time counter ticked past 10 seconds, then 20. The sunlight was warm. The purring was steady. Then, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. The heavy, relaxed weight of the bobcat in Mason's lap suddenly went rigid. "Charlie?" Mason said, his voice lifting in a question. The bobcat's head snapped back. His eyes, usually so bright and focused, glazed over, staring at something Mason couldn't see. The rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing stopped, replaced by a terrifying suspension. Suddenly, the calm routine was shattered. "Charlie's having a seizure," Mason said. Ideally, he would have sounded clinical, like the professional he was, but in the recording, his voice cracked. It was the sound of a father watching his child in pain. The seizure didn't start with a whimper. It started with violence. Charlie's muscles contracted all at once. The powerful legs that could propel him 10 feet into the air began to paddle frantically against Mason's chest. His jaws clamped shut, and his neck arched back in an unnatural, agonizing curve. The caretaker reacted instantly, registering the unexpected timing while trying to comfort the animal. He didn't jump up. He didn't drop the cat. He didn't run for help. There was no help to run for in these first critical seconds. The only help Charlie had was the man holding him. "It's okay." "Oh, buddy." "Okay, Charlie." "Oh," Mason stammered. The words were meaningless, a mantra of comfort spoken more for himself than the cat. He knew Charlie couldn't hear him right now. Charlie was trapped inside a lightning storm in his own brain. The camera was already open, a rare coincidence. Mason realized his phone was still in his hand, recording the ceiling, then the wall, then a blur of fur as he moved to secure the thrashing animal. "This is the first time I've ever caught Charlie having a seizure on camera," Mason noted later, his voice thick with emotion when he reviewed the footage. He hadn't planned to show this side of sanctuary life. People liked the cute photos. They liked the majesty. They didn't like the grim reality of neurological damage. But this was the truth. "I just so happened to have my phone open when it happened," he would explain. But in the moment, the phone was forgotten, placed hastily on the bench beside him, the lens still capturing the scene. The seizure began while Charlie was in the safest place he knew. "He was laying in my lap," Mason whispered, his hands moving to cup Charlie's head, protecting it from banging against the hard wood of the bench armrest. It is a terrifying thing to hold a predator during a seizure. A bobcat has claws that are retractable but razor-sharp and teeth designed to shear flesh. In the throes of a grand mal seizure, the animal has no control. He is not Charlie anymore. He is a whirlwind of muscle and bone. Mason risked serious injury just by holding on, but he didn't let go. If he let go, Charlie would fall to the concrete floor. He would hurt himself. "I see the chaos of it," Mason murmured, watching the erratic jerking of the animal's limbs. Time distorts during a medical emergency. What was likely only 45 seconds felt like an hour. The beautiful face of the bobcat was contorted. The prompt and quiet dignity of the animal vanished, replaced by a visceral, ugly suffering. The owner explained later to the vet that during these episodes, the bobcat effectively abused himself. He didn't mean it intentionally, of course. It was the electricity in his brain firing blindly, causing him to bite his own tongue, to slam his limbs against obstacles, to thrash with such force he could tear a muscle. And then there was the saliva. Charlie began to drool excessively. Thick, ropey strands of saliva foamed around his mouth, dripping onto Mason's jeans, soaking into the flannel shirt. It was a messy, undignified symptom, one that stripped the animal of his majestic aura and left him looking like a sick, vulnerable child. Mason didn't flinch away from the mess. He used his thumb to gently wipe the foam away from Charlie's nose, ensuring the cat could breathe. "Charlie, oh boy, are you okay?" Mason asked, his voice trembling. For a second, the thrashing stopped. Charlie's body went limp, a heavy dead weight in Mason's arms. Mason took a breath, thinking it was over. But then the muscles seized again, harder this time. "We're not done yet, okay?" Mason realized, adjusting his grip. He wrapped his arms tighter around the bobcat's torso, creating a living straitjacket. It wasn't to restrain him, it was to ground him. It was a technique known as deep pressure therapy. He was trying to tell Charlie's nervous system that he was here, he was held, he was safe. The scene captured by the erratic camera angle was heart-wrenching. The morning sun was still streaming in, indifferent to the suffering. The dust motes were still dancing in the light. And in the center of the frame, a grown man was rocking a convulsing wildcat back and forth, whispering prayers into its fur. It highlighted the cruel paradox of nature. This animal was designed for power, for stealth, for independence. And yet, here he was, betrayed by his own biology, completely dependent on the compassion of a human to survive the morning. Mason looked at the animal's eyes. They were wide, terrified, and unseeing. "I've got you," Mason said, his voice firming up. He had to be the anchor. "I've got you, Charlie. You just ride it out. I'm right here." The violence of the seizure began to ebb. The sharp, jerky movements slowed into rhythmic twitching. The paddling of the paws stopped. Charlie let out a low, confused moan, a sound that was neither a growl nor a meow, but a sound of pure confusion. The worst was over. Now came the confusion. When a seizure ends, the brain doesn't just snap back to normal. It enters a post-ictal state. The neurons are exhausted, depleted of energy. The animal is often blind, deaf, and profoundly confused. Charlie went limp in Mason's lap. His breathing was ragged, huffing in and out like a bellows. The excessive drooling slowed, leaving his chin wet and matted. Mason didn't move. He knew that Charlie wouldn't recognize him yet. If he moved too fast, Charlie might bite out of fear, thinking he was trapped by a predator. So Mason sat perfectly still, letting his heartbeat serve as a metronome for the recovering cat. "You're back," Mason whispered softly. "You're coming back to me." He reached for a towel he kept nearby for these instances and gently began to clean Charlie's face. He wiped the saliva from the whiskers. He checked the mouth to make sure Charlie hadn't cracked a tooth or bitten through his tongue. The camera was still running, capturing the heavy silence that follows a storm. Charlie lifted his head. He looked around the room, his eyes trying to focus. He looked at the window. He looked at his own paws. And then, he looked up at Mason. The recognition wasn't immediate, but it was there. The wild panic in the eyes faded, replaced by a weary softness. Charlie let out a breath that sounded like a sigh and dropped his head back onto Mason's chest. Despite the chaotic nature of the medical event, the owner remained steady, providing continuous comfort. Mason stroked the long back of the cat, feeling the tremors slowly fading from the muscles. "You scared me, Particle," Mason said, a sad smile touching his lips. "You really scared me today." He looked at the phone, realizing it had captured the whole thing. He debated deleting it. It was raw. It was painful. It showed the ugly side of rescue work, the heartbreak that comes with loving something that is broken. But then he looked at how Charlie was settling in. The Bobcat, exhausted and weak, began to nudge Mason's hand with his wet nose. It was a gesture of apology, or perhaps gratitude. "I don't know what happened," the gesture seemed to say. "But thank you for holding me while it did." Mason turned the camera around to face them. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair messy, his shirt stained. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a tired man doing a hard job. "He's okay," Mason said to the camera, his voice raspy. "He's coming out of it. He's exhausted." He looked down at the Bobcat. The love remained unconditional. It didn't matter that Charlie was broken. It didn't matter that he required thousands of dollars in vet bills and endless worry. It didn't matter that he could never be wild. He was family. Concluding the video, Mason made a promise to the animal in his arms. He knew Charlie needed to be groomed. It was how cats bonded and soothed themselves after trauma. Since Charlie was too tired to groom himself, Mason would help him feel clean and loved. "I'm gonna give him some licks at least," Mason said, using the shorthand of the rehab world. He meant he was going to groom him, not literally with his tongue, but with his hand, mimicking the rough, rhythmic strokes of a mother cat's tongue, rubbing his chin, kissing his forehead, smoothing the matted fur. He was going to provide the tactile comfort that told the animal, "You are part of my clouder. You are safe." Mason turned off the camera. The video ended, but the story didn't. He sat there for another hour, long after his coffee had gone ice cold. He watched the sun climb higher into the Montana sky, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Charlie slept deeply, the sleep of the dead. Occasionally, a paw would twitch, and Mason's hand would instantly still it, a silent reassurance. Later that day, Mason would post the video. He would write a caption explaining about neurological disorders in wildlife, about the consequences of car strikes, about the reality of rehabilitation. He would warn people that it was graphic. But the comments that would flood in wouldn't be about the horror of the seizure. They would be about the hands. They would talk about the hands that didn't let go. They would talk about the voice that remained calm when the world was shaking. They would talk about the profound, ancient bond between man and beast. Readers from all over the country, grandmothers in Florida, retired veterans in Ohio, farmers in Nebraska, would watch that video and feel a tightening in their chests. They would see their own struggles reflected in the eyes of a bobcat. They would see the fragility of their own aging bodies, the fear of losing control, the terror of the unknown. But they would also see the hope. They would see that even when you are broken, even when you are seizing and drooling and abusing yourself in the chaos of illness, you are worthy of love. You are worthy of being held. Mason shifted his weight, his leg falling asleep under the 30-pound cat. He winced, but he didn't move. He looked down at Charlie, who was now snoring softly, a small bubble of saliva forming on his lip. A comic end to a tragic morning. "You're a handful, Charlie," Mason whispered into the quiet room. Charlie didn't answer. He just slept, safe in the knowledge that when the darkness came for him, he didn't have to face it alone. And in a world that can be so incredibly cruel to the weak, that simple fact was a miracle. As the day fully began, Mason finally prepared to move. He would have to clean his shirt. He would have to call the vet to adjust the medication. He would have to clean up the acclimation room. But for now, he simply leaned down and pressed his forehead against the bobcat's soft, wild head. He gave him those licks, a series of gentle, rhythmic scratches behind the ears that made Charlie sigh in his sleep. The seizure was a reminder of death, but the recovery was a testament to life. And in the heart of America, in a small sanctuary tucked away in the mountains, life, stubborn, broken, beautiful life, was winning.